Good though, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Hub. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the new intro there's a new intro. This intro is actually sent to me by a 16-year-old kid from Orange County. He's an opera Punjabi kid, and he's into making beats, and I just wanted to support and give him a little shout out. So if you guys enjoyed the beat or anything, just make sure to check him out. His name is Young Pharaoh, and his information is on the description and everything. But let's get into today's episode. I'm super excited for today's episode. We've been trying to talk and figure it out for a while now. Many of you guys probably know from the title of the podcast, I'm with Sundeep Morrison today. So she is the producer, actor, everything of Raghead. If you guys have heard of the show, she's also an author, creative, anything, mom of two, I think. So, so I'm gonna have her introduce herself, and we can sort of get into it.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Atinder. I really appreciate it. So yeah, there's a lot that I do, and I appreciate you coming out and seeing the show and everybody who supported it. Yeah.
So let's get into the first thing that you're most well known for, Raghead. Can you tell us a little bit what inspired you to write Raghead and how that sort of started?
Yeah, it was a really personal journey. Mm-hmm. So it's a very personal piece. So in 2012, everyone knows a white supremacist walked into a gurdwara and shot and killed people as they were, just sitting there doing Bart. And that moment really changed my life. So both of my parents are in Wisconsin. My parents, they go to Gurdwara every Sunday. My mom does Kirtan. My parents do Seva. So that particular Sunday, I was in LA, and my brother was in Wisconsin. And so I got a call saying he couldn't reach my parents. And I thought, well, you know what? They're probably sitting in Simran. And he said, no, turn the news on. Something horrible's happened. So watching the events unfold changed my life. It changed the dynamic of our family. It affected our community. And so I was really angry, and I was sad. And I needed to put that anger and sadness somewhere. So I started to write, because I'm also a writer. And just as a release to kind of get that pain out, I wrote Raghead as a short story first. And all the narratives are based on people in my family. Like the main character is based on my dad. And, there's a character that's based on my mom and my masi. And then there's a character that's based on my brother. So I wrote it, and I shared it with people that are close to me. Mm-hmm. And I shared it with my mom, Amiji. And she said, you know what, you should put this out there. And I was very reluctant at first. But that's how it started. And then I was trying to cast it with other Sikh actors, and I couldn't find them. Right. So then I just thought, you know what, I'm going to play each character and put this narrative out there to bring kind of awareness about what's happening to our community still post 9/11 America. So that's how Raghead came to be.
So how did you sort of get into the acting sphere?
Well, I'm a trained actor. I went to the American Musical Dramatic Academy. I studied in New York and then finished my program out here. And that was tough because, growing up in the Punjabi culture. I'm a middle child, and my older brother, he, went into a different profession. My younger brother went into finance, and then here I am in the arts. So my parents had a bit of a hard time, especially my dad. My mom was very supportive, but now he's kind of come full circle. But that's how I started. It was just something I always wanted to do. I just wanted to tell stories. Yeah.
So you've been in Wisconsin? You were in Wisconsin before?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Canada. I'm Canadian originally. And then I spent a lot of time growing up in Wisconsin. We spent our summers there. So the Gurdwara community is that's had an impact on me growing up. Yeah. And my parents, after we all went to college, they decided that they wanted to stay there. So they lived there.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. And just to hit back on you about Raghead, I remember when I went, I watched it 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I think.
Pomona College.
Pomona College, shout out Pomona.
Yeah.
But we watched it, and it was a lot more than just highlighting what happened in Wisconsin. A lot of the stuff resonated with me. It was really emotional, seeing I feel it's a lot more than I know that's how you word it, so it's a lot more than just talking about what happened in Wisconsin. Right. It really hits on the youth and our identity too, how we're trying to make it through. Yeah,
and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show, because racism has so many different faces, right? There's soft racism, which is very prevalent in, professional spaces, especially the white people that say that they're allies and advocates, but they still have that bias. And then there's that overt racism akin to the people wearing the MAGA hats and that are in our faces. And then I just wanted to show all the layers of how did we kind of had to adapt and change our identity post 9/11. You know, because I remember there's one monologue. I play a character who's based off of my aunt and a little bit of my mom, but I remember in our family, there was our cousin who was a working professional. He was a doctor. And after 9/11, there was so much fear that he wore the star, had a dadi, and his mom was so afraid. She actually was vocal about, maybe he should cut his hair. And I remember that conversation of how devastating it was, but also how it highlighted the fear.
Yeah. That same thing happened to me, very similar. Like for my dad actually said it to me. It was when I first got accepted into UC Irvine. It was when the San Bernardino shooting happened. Right here in Southern California. And my dad was like, "Then are you sure you want to keep your hair?" Yeah. Like it was out of fear too. Like he's never once said that before. And he was like, "You're going into a new spot." Like back home, I was in a very supportive community. Right. All my friends were super cool with me keeping my hair. But my dad's like, "We've never been to Irvine. We don't know anybody in Irvine. Yeah. What are the chances?" That's something
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. And it didn't dawn on me until I became a mom, the fear that you have, because your bachche, your children, are basically your heart walking outside of your body in the world. And I think that's a very valid fear that immigrant parents have, especially when we are visible minorities. Because then I can understand it. I empathize with your dad he just wanted you to be safe.
Yeah. And I think I applaud you for the work you're doing. It really helps highlight especially into you were saying bringing it into different social spheres. Right now it's just it was most of the crowd was Indian, South Indian at Raghead. Right. And you're trying to take it into spaces where there's white people go to it and you're trying to figure it out.
I mean, I was so grateful for everyone who came out, but if I'm really, I use my art as a mode of activism. Yeah. And so for me, if I'm really going to make an impact, the brown community, the Punjabi, the Gursikhs, the Desis, we know our struggle, right? So this is nothing new to us. But if I'm really going to foster change, my goal is to take it into white spaces. So maybe that white person who knows nothing about us. And the sad thing is over 70% of Americans don't know who we are. Yeah. And Gursikhs, we've had this over 150-year history in North America alone. Yeah. And so if I can present this story and show them, then maybe it'll wake up something in their hearts, and that'll hopefully be a factor for change, But that is the goal, to take it into white spaces.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then we talked about Raghead. You want to now talk about, you're also an author.
Yeah.
You wrote a book, so you want to talk about your book a little bit?
So I wrote a book. It's called Lady Bitch Whore. Let me show it to you guys. It's my first book. And it's also a very personal piece. So for me, anything I create, I try to write what I know. And what I know is the experience of what it is to grow up in Canada as a queer Punjabi Sikh child and now a woman. And that was really hard for me. So I'm bisexual, but I am married. I'm in a monogamous marriage. But I had a really hard time. And I think we were talking about that even you growing up, you were maybe one of 2 Punjabi kids in your school. And that's really hard. Yeah. And so even growing up in Calgary, Alberta, there weren't a lot of brown kids.
And we hear, honestly, for us in California, Canada, it's all Punjabi.
I know for us, now. That's how it is. Yeah. But at that time, it was really hard. And so it's I wrote Lady Bitch Whore because I thought, what would have been the book that I would have needed or would have helped me as a young woman or a girl transitioning to womanhood? So I wrote that, and I consider it like a memoir and manual. So it's my story interspersed with life lessons. And I was raised by my Biji. My Naniji lived with us, and she was very important and impactful till this day. I always say everything good in me is because of her. Yeah. And then fast forward, when I became a mom, I have a daughter. She's going to be 10 this summer. Wow. And that really made me aware that, okay, now I have this girl child that I'm raising. What do I want to instill in her? Because the main message we get as women is that you have to be perfect or mean or sexy to succeed as a woman. And I think you can create your own identity. So it literally is my story.
Yeah, and I think that's really unique. Like you were talking about it before we started. You were saying like you want it to be like for a girl Sikh Punjabi woman, like a woman or girl getting into womanhood. I think that's so unique because we don't really have that many individuals.
We don't.
Or like inspiration type, like books, like. And I think that's really unique. One thing that really stood out for me, like from your book, was that there's a piece that you said about like sexual assault. We had talked about this right after Raghead. So pretty much, I've been meaning to do an episode on sexual assault for a while, and like after Sundeep's show, I just talked to her. I actually didn't know about this. I was like, "Hey, Sundeep, I'm struggling to find a guest to talk about sexual assault," and she just turned around and was like, "Well, I'm like you're standing right in front of a victim," and she was like, "I'm completely an open book." And then she showed me a piece of her book, and it was about sexual assault and the Punjabi community. And again, like this also stems from I don't know if you guys know about the Core Movement page. Pretty much what they do is get Punjabi girls' stories, women too, and say like how the experiences that they've had with their family members or just within the community and the like sexual assaults that occur. So that's sort of the inspiration behind it. And then Sundeep's book, I read that little portion of it, and it sort of showed me. So do you want to like talk about sort of that experience and how that was?
Yeah, and I think kudos to you as a Punjabi man for you to highlight and bring awareness to this. I commend you because a lot of people do not want to touch this subject, let alone talk about it. So for me, sexual assault and sexual abuse is prevalent, broad spectrum across many different communities. But I believe that in our Punjabi community, no one wants to acknowledge it, So when you approached me, I was like, you know what? If I can engage in a dialogue and lend my voice, then maybe it can help. But I think that men and women are victims in our community, and it's sad and it's heartbreaking. And the only way to break the cycle and bring awareness is to talk about it. But ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, right? No one fucking talks about it.
No, and even if they are, like, just like from what the page, she gets threatened. They're like, hey, don't post this stuff. This is not cool. You shouldn't be even talking about this.
Of course. I mean, look, I think anytime you touch on the subject of sex or sexuality and then sexual abuse, people recoil, right? And I think because the way we're presented just with the idea of sex, there's so much shame.
Yeah.
There's so much shame and judgment, right? And of course, everyone's heard like loki ki kahange, loki ki sochange, right? Yeah. And so for me, I was relatively my daughter's age the first time I was abused. And a lot of people think that, ibarlian la kama, right? Like that these things happen with strangers or other people. And the statistics are that sexual abuse occurs within the home, usually with a relative or someone we're very close to.
Yeah.
And that's really scary.
That was the most shocking thing to me. Like, I don't know. I was talking to like a friend, and we were talking about the movement, like the page again.
It's very important. I commend the Core Movement.
And most of the posts were about family members, and I just started thinking about my own family. I was like, no way, like.
Yeah, it could never happen. And then you start wondering, like, what don't I know?
Yeah.
And I think, for everyone listening, it's like have these conversations, whether you're a young person or a mom or a masi or anyone. It's just to talk about it can do a lot of healing, but it can also educate. So, and that's the crazy thing in the Punjabi community, right?
Yeah.
Like as a kuri, right, growing up, the first thing I was made aware of was how puritanical our culture is, right? Like I always try to separate the Punjabi culture from Sikhi because I feel like they're two completely different.
Yeah.
And so within the Punjabi culture, we want our girls to be pure, unblemished, virgins, right? And our boys, we say, go jake, munde koi na munda wa, we don't even think.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, your sexuality is compartmentalized. And then in the realm of sexual abuse, I think that's one of the main reasons why, because they don't want to talk about it, because then in their eyes, their girl child is going to be blemished when she's been violated. You know what I mean? So instead of thinking that, this child is tainted somehow, that perpetrator is the one, and that's why I think of it as like, sadi kudi bare ki sochange, hone da bya nahi hona.
Yeah.
So For me, I carried that pain around for a very, very long time.
And so when it was like the first time, I mean,
Yeah.
applaud to you honestly for even like talking about it right now and like willing to share. You wrote about it in your book.
Yeah,
so,
I wrote about it in my book.
A lot of the people that you're even like, a lot of people that have your book, you don't even know them, right? And you're willing to share your story and tell. So what was like sort of the inspiration to like share your story?
I think doing the healing was a huge part, and I'm still healing. I think that as a sexual abuse survivor, you know, it's never, you know, like the healing is ongoing because it's something that's a part of you. Mm-hmm. And for me, writing it was very healing. And I also just was thinking about our community, you know, young girls out there or people who've gone through this and maybe they have suppressed it or pushed it down. But the sad thing it is it'll creep up in different parts of your life, if in terms of relationships, intimacy. And the fucked up thing is that when I did have the courage to tell my parents, because I know a lot of people don't, and it's really hard, and I completely understand that because there's so much working against you, is that I remember thinking that, you know, our boyfriends and our girlfriends, like our true loves, never have a place in our home because we're taught, no, you can't date. Bya to mela kuch nahi karna, right? But then the people that violate us have a seat at the table. Yeah. We'll serve them roti. Yeah. And that was really hard. You know, we give them space. Yeah. So, I'll share a little bit
of course,
of what I wrote. I just want to give a trigger warning to anybody who's listening that this is about sexual abuse. So the chapter is titled Hiding My Bruises. I was 7 years old when I was molested for the first time. It was by a relative, someone I loved and trusted, and he betrayed me. The first time happened when we were gathering at our house. I had to pee, and he followed me into the bathroom. Once inside, he told me to take off all my clothes. And then he took all of his clothes off and told me to lie on top of him. I did as I was told. The second time, in the same bathroom, he told me to kneel down and put his penis in my mouth. Again, I did as I was told. It would happen again on other occasions, but these moments stuck with me most of my life. I obviously didn't know anything about sex at 7 years old, but I knew what he did to me was wrong. I'm sure there would have been more times where he would have violated me, but I was saved at that time by a knock on the bathroom door. He quickly pulled me up and answered the door. It was my BG. She angrily asked what was going on. He told her that I had asked for help going to the bathroom. A lie. So, but I'm sure a lot of listeners, you know, would sadly have similar experiences. My BG caught wind of what was happening. Oh, wow. Yeah, and even though we never had a full conversation at that time, because I think that the generation she came from, I don't know that she had the verbiage, but she knew it was wrong, and from that moment, she protected me. Okay, wow. And I think this happens a lot, and she was my advocate. Yeah. You know, and it was only years into my 20s that I remember, because I would see this person at family gatherings and all those feelings would wake up. And I'd never told my parents because I thought, A, what is it going to do? Yeah. Right? Rolai pouga. Yeah. And I had a lot of shame attached to it. And then I'm grateful for therapy. Yeah. A lot of people shit on the idea of therapy, but therapy saved my life. Yeah. And so I sat my mom down and I told her, this is what happened.
And so this is almost 20 years later.
This is 20, I was 22. Wow. Going on 23. Wow. When I finally sat down and told my mom, and my mom and I are very close, and she had a really hard time just digesting that information. And then I told my dad. Yeah. And my dad was completely silent. He didn't know what to say. And my mom was apologetic. Yeah. You know, and that kind of changed our dynamic. And I was grateful that it was really hard for my parents to hear these words about someone they trusted. And they disconnected. you know. But I know that that narrative is not the narrative.
Yeah.
I know a lot of women who finally, when they talk about what the uncle or even auntie did, that their parents just glaze over it. They don't fucking do anything. And then imagine that feeling of constantly having to see that person that violated you, and they're sitting there eating roti across from you.
Yeah.
They're having cha at your house.
Yeah.
That's re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
And so that was a moment that really stuck with me also. But I did it for me in terms of releasing this and letting the people, you know, your parents are your advocates.
Yeah.
And I say this, you know, your parents should protect you. And your mental well-being and your physical being and your safety should be more important than status.
Yeah. And like sadly, like a lot of my episodes again always like come back to this, like the whole saying, right? Like, kind of like it sort of sucks because like I read some posts and they're like, even though I told my mom or my parents, like we couldn't risk ostracizing our family member.
Yeah.
Like it was not worth like to the family, like what would happen. Because one of the posts was like, if I had told my mom only, but if my mom was the one to say something, she was the one that's going to be like, oh, she's the one trying to like mess with the family. Like, that's what sort of like.
And that's so fucking sad because, you know, it's like your social status more important than outing a perpetrator, because guess what? You know what I mean? It's not just your daughters. This person's probably doing it to someone else's sons and daughters. You know, and that's where we have to shake up the community.
And that's also the issue. Like, we're so scared to address these issues. And again, like, it is similar to the Bakersfield incident. We try to keep everything hush hush.
Yeah.
Like, like this is only happening to us.
Yeah.
But if we like are able to voice our voices a little more and sort of say like this does happen, it's gonna be more of a thing. Like, okay, we do need to expose what's going on. Because for us, it's again like in our community, it's like sexual harassment, all that. Like, oh, the biyani or not. That's the main.
We you know, commodify women and men. But I always felt like I wasn't a whole person, that the reason I was getting educated was so I would be marriage material. The end game was, right? A chico di banna, right? You know? And we need to start looking at our sisters, our daughters, our cousins, our friends as people. Yeah. And I think that's what Sikhi is, right? I don't think that Guru Nanak Dev Ji wanted us to diminish one gender at all. Yeah. I think if we're really going to be true Gursikhs, then we talk about the uncomfortable. Yeah. Right? Then we really advocate for each other. But shame trumps so much. Yeah. And that's why I believe that this goes on. And for me, it was really rough because the second time, you know, or like the second moment that was a defining moment in my teen years where I had another moment where I was sexually abused was in the Gurdwara.
Yeah, and that's a big one.
And for me, it was really hard. Like I grew up in the Gurdwara was always part of my identity. Yeah. We went to Gurmat camp, you know, and especially in Calgary, it was a tight-knit community. Yeah. And I had a love for Kirtan and going and being there. But I remember that was a time where I was, you know, more of a tomboy and really grappling with my sexuality. And I would always like play tag with the boys. And I thought I was, you know, one of the guys. And I remember being upstairs playing a game of tag and they just like pushed me down and grabbed my breast. And I was like, what is going on? I felt so violated. And they were like, well, we thought, you know, don't you want to be one of the boys? And they laughed it off. And I was just like paralyzed with fear, and there was no one I could talk to, you know, and so Gurdwara in a way became a place of trauma for me. And that's why even till this day, there was so much that's happened in the Gurdwara space for me. And it's painful because again, I love, that's the one place that's our sanctuary. Yeah. So, and this is very commonplace, and it happens. And so even with writing Raghead, it's a piece about Sikhi and identity, and I had a really hard time going into Gurdwara spaces. Still now, it's very triggering, but I'm working through it. But even within our Gurdwara system, there's sexual abuse is rampant, and no one talks about it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I would say that that, you know, gurdwaras are our central hub, right? They're social and spiritual institutions. What if we talked about this? What if from the podium someone said, hey, you know, we're going to do this about sexual assault in our community? I think it would change lives. Because if you present a taboo topic in a space that is, you know, where we all come together and unifying, then it changes the narrative.
And I think like we fail to realize the frequency of like such things, like you were saying. Like I had 2 to 3 individuals reach out to me already and say like they weren't like sexually assaulted or harassed, but they said like in the Gurdwara, like guys come up and are like, hey, like what's up? Or, like, and a lot of the time, even if they say something like, it's either like somebody from the Gathka team or like somebody well known, you know, community figure, like a male,
prominent figure.
Prominent figure. And like
someone respected guy, and trusted.
Like, he's the guy that does the most seva or something. So even if something is said is like, you're like, stop, why are you lying? Like it's not.
And that's how these predators and perpetrators stay in power. And they can get away with that. They can get away with it. And that cycle just continues. Because those that disrupt it are bulldozed over. We don't believe them. We think, oh, chugli nindawa, jangan kam kharab karna chahnte hai. And it ruins people's lives. And I think between the two of us, we could go on, we probably can go on talking about all the people we know. And what they do is they keep that pain and fear inside of them. And that's how they live their life. And so I really feel that there needs to be a shift, that people need to have these conversations. And if we go back into how we talk about sex or the lack thereof in our houses, it's sad. I think sex and sexuality is a part of life. It's a part of the human experience, Hannah. And I never had a sex talk, you know. I know most Desi kids don't. And even within our Gurdwara, you look at the colonization of our sexuality, right? There was once a time where if someone was doing kirtan or you were listening to Gurbani, where men and women sat together, we have such a separation. And I think those are colonial effects. And so even I think that when I talk to people, you know, that are thinking about having kids, I say, ask yourself this of, how would you feel if your child was gay? How would you feel if your child was bi? You know, how are you going to are you going to acknowledge their sexuality? Because if you're incapable of doing all those things, then don't be a parent. Because we don't have bacche to satisfy our needs and to put them in a box. You know, your bacche come through you, but they don't belong to you. And even when you read Gurbani, right, the dynamic of a family, so I think we have to really revisit these things and recondition.
So for you, like, what was like the stepping stone of, hey, I'm going to tell my parents? Like, what was like the breakthrough?
So
like, just so like other people know too, like, if they're going through something similar.
I mean, it took me many years. I mean, I kept this pain and this secret in my chest until I was in my mid-20s. And I remember dealing with depression and anxiety. And I still, you know, I don't like to say I suffer from depression and anxiety because I live with it. I manage it. I'm not always in a state of suffering, but I do. I live with depression and anxiety. And I remember being suicidal. And it really affected my intimacy in my relationships because there was so much trauma. And finally, I got to a point where I was like, I need to release this. I need to talk to my mom. And I remember thinking, okay, Sundeep, the only thing you have control over is speaking your truth. You have no idea how your parents are going to digest this information. And you
especially
know,
in our community.
And you know what? That's not part of this. You're doing this for your soul to get this out. And granted, I was older. And so that was the impetus for me because it was something I was carrying. And it affected me so much that it made me not want to be alive. And I think that that's more commonplace. So I did it for myself and it was hard. But I think that it's easier said than done. And it did cause a lot of tension in my family. But at the end of the day, I got that out and off my soul.
So I applaud you for even like taking the steps eventually, and like being able to tell your parents, and like that's awesome. It's tough. It's scary to hear about like these type of things because like I have so many cousins and sisters. Like it's like whoa, like.
And it happens. I mean, it plagues every community. Yeah. But especially our community, you know, and I get it. For me, just growing up, I love my Punjabi identity. Yeah, like I'm a Punjaban to the core. Yeah. And I love my Sikh. And I also am a Canadian, you know, I'm American as well. Like that's part of my identity. And I feel like when you grow up, it's like thode pair do kishtiyan cha, right? Your feet are in two different boats and you're trying not to sink. Yeah. And I feel like we have such an identity struggle. Yeah. You know? And it's so fucking hard. And that's why I wrote my book, that if, you know, I could help anybody, because I know a lot of people in our community are suffering right now.
Yeah. And the thing that sort of like shocks me every time is, well, even for myself, like I didn't know this stuff happened until it was brought to like the social platform. Like I would have never heard about this if I wasn't on Instagram or like this page decided to pop up. Yeah. I would have just kept going on with my life without even knowing. Which is sort of sad because it, like, I've said this before too, like, it takes one big event or something for us to realize what's really going on, even though it's so frequent. Yeah. We end up turning a blind eye. Even if we're not turning a blind eye, we're just not exposed to such things.
Yeah, and I think that your experience as a male growing up is different than, you know, what most women go through. Yeah. And that's why, again, I applaud your empathy. And you giving a fuck about this topic and actually talking about it. Because a lot of people don't want to touch it. But it happens. And I think, how do you break that? How do you protect our girls by talking about it? And you know what? The uncles, the chache, the tae, the gyanis, the granthis, whoever, the people that do it, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. Because you know what's going to happen is they're going to go and do it somewhere else. You know? And I'd rather cause a big shakeup and maybe wear that scarlet letter of if that's what it takes to protect someone else's daughter going through it. You know? So it's and sadly it's really prevalent.
Yeah. And like for like individuals going through such things, like what would you sort of like, do you have like a word of advice or anything?
Yeah, I would say there's a great resource. We have the Sikh Family Center.
Oh yeah.
And they're an amazing resource, and they have services in Punjabi and in English, and they understand the need for discretion and also protection. So I would say, if you're going through something, reach out and get help. There are people out there who will listen and who are going to believe you, because that's a big thing too.
Yeah, believe you.
When someone comes to you and says, this is what happened to me, just to utter the words, I believe you, is life-changing because you feel heard. Yeah. So the Sikh Family Center is huge. You know, the suicide hotline. I hope that, you know, after we do the podcast, we can add the number, but I would say talk. Yeah, no, but I would say talk about it. Yeah. If you're carrying something in your heart, right? You know, talk about it. Yeah, I think release that. Yeah,
that's like a big thing. Like talking about it, like even for myself, even if it's a minor issue that like I just keep contemplating in my head, I notice that like I bring myself down a lot. But like the instant like I just speak it out to a friend or something, it's like, whoa, I feel so much better now.
Yeah, and I think that's ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, right? We can talk about everything else all day long, right? Yeah. But ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ. You know, and I think families should talk about just sexuality as a whole, but also, you know, checking in with your friends. I think checking in is a huge thing. I think saying, hey, are you all right? Are you good? Because that's all it takes.
Yeah, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And but I would implore the young men listening to this that for you to be true allies, check in on your sisters, check in on your brothers. Men suffer from this as well. Yeah. And that can be the tipping point of changing somebody's life. Yeah. Because ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, you know, maybe you can get help somewhere else. But also, I think our communities come a long way, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what steps do you see us taking? I mean, even just the youth. I think
I would
like,
say
a
the
lot of
youth.
it-
I would say, so just like, I think we need to reanalyze our Sikhi,
Yeah.
you know? The Sikhi that I was presented with, I'm unlearning and undoing because the Sikhi that I was presented with was very conditional. And so much emphasis was put on the exterior and the external rather than the internal working. And Sikhi at its core is unifying. There's no divisiveness, है ना? And I think that I get excited. I see a lot of young, ragis. I see a lot of young people that are beautifully educated about the Shri Guru Granth Sahib, and they're spreading the word of Sikhi. But I think within that, if you can include these topics of, hey, sexual abuse occurs. And if we're going to be real Gursikhs, then let's stop this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's what I would love to see the young Granthis do.
Yeah.
That have that passion. Because even writing Raghead, I was so apprehensive putting that out in the world because I thought, mere vaal katte hoya, I'm queer. My husband is a Gora. Mere bare ki sochange.
Yeah.
I thought, honestly, I had no place.
Yeah.
I was like, do I have a right lending my voice to this narrative? Am I Sikh enough?
Yeah, that's the question that I often question myself with, like, even discussing topics within this. Like, I'm like, am I even Sikh? I can't even, like...
But I think that it's inside of you that we're so taught that we have to go through the middleman. We have to have someone validate our Sikhi, right? And who's anybody to judge our Sikhi? Who is that? It's our connection to Paramatma, like straight. So I would say that in terms of sexual abuse, let's talk about it in our sacred spaces. So then it no longer becomes taboo.
Yeah.
And I know it's easier said than done, but imagine, again, if you're the girl going through this, right? Or the boy, and you're sitting in Sangat, and someone says, hey, we're, next Sunday after this, we're going to have cha and we're going to talk about this. Like, I think that's what's missing in our Gurdwara systems is the social, emotional support.
Yeah. And like the Gurdwara is made to be like connect with your Sangat.
Sangat. It's a central it's the cornerstone of our community, right? It's like when people come from India, where's the first place they find help? Madad karne lai thonu naukri chahiye hai, job chahiye hai, kuch bhi chahiye hai. You go to the Gurdwara.
Yeah. And like even for myself, like we didn't have any Punjabis like where I'm from Sikhs. So like our central space was the Gurdwara. That's where you connect with each other. Even the kids, we all used to, that's where we hung out.
That's where you hung out. And it's such a central hub. And I also, and I think too for our parents, right? Like my parents are older generation and did this stuff still occur when they were young? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But did anybody talk about it? No.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, we have that kind of puritanical thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that if we could offer these services, like we have a Pradhan Mantri, we have a secretary, why can't we have, community connection person there too? I don't even know what that title would look like, but I think it should be a male and a female position. And then you know what? Audit your committee.
Yeah.
Really, really look at the people you're bringing in, to foster Sikhi. Are they actually holding up? To our tenets. So that's what I feel. I feel like because if you are a parent and you hear this dialogue in a space like that, maybe it'll make you think twice of like, you know what? Mere ko bhi chote tiya pota. Main unna beh ke gal kara. Yeah. And that way, even if you don't have the words, you're checking. Mein pota tu theek hai? Yeah. Because I feel like that's the next step and the next shift.
Yeah. That was like spot on answer. That was like really.
I just feel like, because like you said, Sangat, it's such a core of who we are. Yeah. And so let's actually let Sangat come, let's take our Sikhi to the next level. Yeah. Because for a lot of people, going to Gurdwara, it's almost like a fashion show.
Yeah.
Real talk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's true.
Utthe jaake matha tek ke, kanta back ke, then gallan gappa maar ke, and you eat some langar and then you go home and then you do it again.
Yeah, next Sunday.
Next Sunday. But then what are you really getting? Some people get ras out of Gurbani, right? But I would love to go there and actually be made to think and elevate.
Yeah.
You know,
and like just like to a smaller scale, like the Gurdwara is made for that, but like even on college campuses, we have like Sikh student associations. Like
I think it's so beautiful.
Those, but, like,
no, but we should. I mean, I'm so grateful.
We're able to like. I was just talking to like a lot of members the other day, and we're just able to connect on so many different issues. We have so many different discussions. Like that's like one of the main stems. Like that's what like sort of caused the like not caused, but like as inspiration for the podcast too. Is like we would have these discussions, and we'd be like, oh, we're like able to relate to each other. Like even being like on a scene of like all of us came from different backgrounds, but like coming together like. During school, we're so busy. That was like the central time where all of us could come together and just talk about what was going on in our lives, how our upbringing was affecting us, how we're doing in college, and all that type of things. Like everybody's like after those discussion nights or something, we all feel so good. We're like, somebody gets it. Yeah, somebody understands it.
And that's what it is. It's understanding, and that's why like what you're doing is so fucking important.
Thank you.
And I mean that because and a big shout out to the Sikh student associations. I commend you. UC Irvine, Pomona, Claremont. I mean, everybody, UCLA. When I go out there and I see the community of young people, my heart gets full because I was like, fuck, I wish I had that.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to school in New York, I was the only Punjabi Sikh person in my entire program.
Wow.
It was very alienating.
Yeah.
And I could relate to my white friends on only a certain level.
A certain level.
And so I would say the Sikh student associations engage in a dialogue, check in on each other. Yeah. You know, we have what I call the disease of exceptionalism in our community, where it's like attain doctor, lawyer, engineer. Like you have to attain these amazing titles to be even considered a success. Yeah. Life is hard. Yeah. Period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Life is fucking hard. And I think that to exist and to just to do good and manifest that to me is success. Yeah. You know, like there's the intellectual quotient and the emotional quotient. I think the emotional quotient, if you don't have that, how can you operate?
Yeah.
So for you, when you see other people on campuses, like you as a Gursikh brown man, you know what I mean? Yeah. Your counterparts are going to understand you to a level where your white friends won't. Yeah. They can have empathy, but they won't get what the fuck you go through unless they live it. Yeah. And so that's why the Sikh student associations check in on each other. Yeah. You know, we're in a socio-politically hostile climate. You know, I talk about anticipatory stress of just existing.
That one is like, you want to explain that a little bit? That one really like resonates with me.
Yeah. So for me, I was trying to come up, you know, I was like, what's the most succinct way I can talk about stress in our community? And so I call it anticipatory stress, where just the anticipation of something happening by virtue of being brown and wearing a turban or being visible minority, what that causes in your life. So for example, you just go into a space and the moment you walk out of your door, right? I don't know if you've ever felt this. You probably feel it to a deeper degree, right? But your chest gets tight. Yeah. Or you walk into a white space and maybe nothing has happened, but you can feel eyeballs on you.
We learned to joke about it. It's actually really funny. Yesterday, a bunch of my friends, there was like 2 guys and 2 girls who were just hanging out, and we were getting tacos, and we're like, we saw some guy like screaming, like just some Gora screaming, like messing around. And we're like, damn, if that was us, we'd get so much shit.
Fuck
like we were just eating we're looking around like, oh no, we're the only brown people here. Yeah. Like, and we joke about it, but like it's actually more of like it is like a stress. We're like, oh shit, we're the only brown people here.
Fuck yeah, it becomes super amplified when you're in a white space. You're like, I'm the only chocolate chip in the cookie dough. Yeah. And the real truth is, the darker you are, the harder it is. Yeah. Right? The darker you are, the harder it is. And so when you anticipate these things happening, you're walking, like take something as simple as just getting tacos. Yeah. Right? All of a sudden, something is happening and you're on high alert. Yeah. Right? Like, oh, what am I doing? How am I sitting? Yeah. You know, how am I speaking? Am I speaking too loud? And what's going on? So you start to self-edit, and that causes stress. So something simple and superfluous is just, oh, I'm going to go grab a taco. Yeah. Turns it into what's going to happen next. Yeah. And that is the stress, and that's why checking in on each other. Yeah. That's a real stress that's happening. I feel it when I go into spaces, you know, and it sucks. But how do you remedy it? It's just by advocating for each other, I think.
Advocating for each other, like knowing you have a base, like support
knowing you have
system,
a base.
That's huge.
And that's why, as a woman, for you to, like, again, talking about this, we could have shot the shit about anything for an hour, you know? But this is happening. This is real, and people are out there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other talking points or anything you want to mention?
No, I would just say, I commend you.
Yeah. No, I'm just...
No, for real. Look, I think that these are the narratives we need to put out there.
Yeah.
You know, that when it comes to existing in sexual assault and sexual abuse in our community, you know, hopefully these narratives bring light to it.
Yeah. I just want to thank you too.
Oh, no, thank you.
You shared your story. Make sure to check out her book. And Raghead, hopefully going on tour soon.
Thank you.
Something. So if you guys, definitely recommend that show. It's like, I didn't know what to expect, but it's very emotional. I think like most of the people that like have watched it can say, like, agree with me that show is really. And then again, like, I want to say thank you for like commenting. Hopefully like somebody got something out of this talk about sexual assault. Because I think it is really hard to discuss in our community, like you said.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for letting us use your studio. It's
no
awesome.
worries. No worries.
Have anything else?
No, I just thank you. And in terms of Raghead, you can follow Raghead USA on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And then my tour dates will be up at sundeepmorrison.com. And then my book, Lady Bitch Whore, is available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And I'll link everything in the descriptions and everything.
Yeah,
so.
but just thank you to the Hub podcast. No, I appreciate you. Yeah. And just send love to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed.